You're listening to the Shop Podcast S1 Ep5 with your host, Richie Tavaki, and special guest, Ayanna U'Dongo. Welcome back to the podcast where I'm very excited to interview my new friend, Ayanna U'Dongo, a video artist here in the San Francisco Bay Area. She goes in depth about her story, what it is that inspires what it is she does and helps her make her art. Everything from what has gone on around her, what she has been through, her culture, ethnicity, and so much more. We also touch on the topic of race and what it is that she does in order to bring the best representation of African Americans and tell their story. Because we're going into details on the history and the topic of race, there is a little viewer discretion advised. It's a great interview, so stick around. Welcome back to the podcast, people, and I have with me artist Ayanna U'Dongo. There we go. Ayanna U'Dongo.
Don't go.
So, all right. How's it going?
It's going really great, man.
That's
a lot
good.
of things are happening. I'm really excited about what's coming up for me.
Nice. Okay, and this is actually one of the best places to talk about it right now. So that being said, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do as an artist.
Well, I am a video artist. I started video back in the Midwest. I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana, in the mid 1900s, and so the town was not that receptive to people of color when it came to the arts, and so I used to watch my dad as a painter and a sculptor create his work and just pretty much install it in the house, and that happened a lot for people of color in my hometown. So watching my dad create his work, especially when he was using jazz, he's an avid jazz person, and as a shy child, I watched his process as a painter and as a sculptor, and my mom was a mesmerizing storyteller. And I used to listen to her stories. Unfortunately, the children were the subject of her stories a lot, much to our dismay. But it was entertaining, and she kept everybody just laughing from the stories she would tell about it. And from watching my father paint and sculpt, watching my mother and listening to her stories, that kind of planted a seed in me to want to be a creative person. Because I was shy, I didn't get a chance to really explore my creative self until I got into my teens. I wasn't very much invited to be a part of my peer group. I was a isolated loner kid pretty much all my life, actually. And I found the creative process. It was slow because we were, I want to say, poor. We didn't realize we were poor, or I didn't realize we were poor until I got much older. But not having access to the particular supplies and equipment that would help the process of creating, I learned to become a dancer first. I had my body and the radio. And through dance is where I started to find my voice.
Nice.
And I did dancing throughout high school and won trophies every year. Unfortunately, because of the nature of where I was living, my counselor never mentioned that I could have got a dance scholarship at Juilliard.
Really?
And so I didn't find out about Juilliard until a month before I graduated from high school.
Really?
So it was really hurtful that I had that talent and never had a chance to really develop it. So from there, I got eventually married, had 3 amazing sons, eventually divorced after 18 years, went to Chicago. I had a choice between Chicago or New York. And it turned out that it was better a transitional place for me to do to Chicago first.
Right.
Eventually, I got hired at Video Data Bank,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the largest distributors of independent video. And because I worked in that company for 7 years, that's why I learned to become a video artist. I didn't know what video art was until I was hired there. And because they had a screening room, I literally lived there 7 days a week
Mm-hmm.
in the screening room. And I got a chance to see all the artists who were making video, all the artists that would visit, who were visual artists or creating art, because at the Video Data Bank was in the School of the Art Institute, across the street from the Art Institute itself. Um, that gave me the access to all kinds of creative people. So those people that were impacting the art world would come as a visitor,
Right.
and then we would have the opportunity to interview. I think I did over at least 46 interviews of
Okay.
artists that came there at the time. And that's the process I learned by trial and error. I saw what was considered good video art, and I'm like, really? I could do that. So that's what I started doing, and then I started selecting the particular artists that I liked.
Okay.
Like the artist that really inspired, video artist that inspired me was George Kushar, and George was actually in San Francisco. I eventually moved where I am now in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. Never had a chance to meet him personally, but I wanted so much to thank him because George was a prolific video maker, and he was famous for his B movies. He was a professor here in San Francisco,
Okay.
and he made these historical and hysterical films and videos. And I've watched his work, and I'm like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I thought maybe I wanted to be a filmmaker, but once I got my hands on video, it was symbiotic for me because I love the idea of looking in that viewfinder and having that spontaneous kind of capture and looking at the immediacy of looking at the imagery. If I didn't like it, I can go back and just do it again. Unlike film, where it's this static process of, shooting, exposures, and giving it to somebody else, and you don't know what's going to happen to that film once it's in the hands of someone else. So that's what I loved about video and video art. Being able to see the works of people who also inspired, like Marlon Riggs,
Mm-hmm.
Sadie Benning, Ellen Spiro. I mean, all the historical pioneers of video art was at Video Data Bank. So
Nice.
Nam June Paik, he was considered the godfather of video art.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody after that, I got a chance to see all of their work historically. Some of the Vito Acconci.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite pieces is called Pryings, where he has his girlfriend at the time, and she's really close into the camera, almost filling the frame, and he's trying to pry her eyelids open, and it goes on for 20 minutes of her resisting the prying and him trying to open her eyes. And he doesn't win, but it's just it's the statement behind what was going on with that particular piece. A lot of the work that was made earlier was performative, so a
Right.
lot of dance, movement. What's my friend? There's one particular artist who was teaching plants the alphabet. It was just really clever things that artists did. And then and then we're talking about the 80s, 90s. This is when I'm exposed to it. I got with Video Data Bank in 1990 until 1997.
Okay.
And with that exposure, I really grew as an artist and really found my voice. And I started exploring particular subjects that were of interest to me, especially sexuality and gender.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started exploring that, I started also realizing I am growing while I'm learning this particular art form.
Right.
And I had explored my own sexuality, and that in itself was pretty amazing. So at some point, I realized that being in the Midwest, I needed to expand because I felt limited in what I was trying to express
Mm-hmm.
through the video art and sexuality and gender. And I had to think to myself, where is the mecca of sexuality in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out, for me, it's San Francisco.
Right.
So in 1998, the end of 98, my son and my partner at the time, we jumped on an Amtrak train, and it became 1999 while we were on the train. So they were playing Prince's 1999 on the train as it came in. And we showed up here in Richmond, California, which is, what is that? That is north of San Francisco, Oakland area.
Right.
And started our slow process of getting ourselves acclimated to the new kind of environment. I mean, California is a very unique state.
Yeah.
And I love it because it really helped me find out who and what I needed to become as a person and as an artist.
Right.
I call myself a video artist. I don't call myself a content maker.
Mm-hmm.
It to me is two different things. And we don't have the time to go into that, but I prefer to be called a video artist.
Video artist.
And when I got here, it was a struggle. We hit some bumps, homelessness and things of that nature. But finally, also my partner and I split within a year of being here.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I started getting my traction, and eventually got a call because I had left a message for this sign for a studio. Unbeknownst to me, I was looking for a studio apartment.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know there was a difference between a studio for artists and a studio apartment, and it turned out it was a studio for artists.
Okay.
And that's where I am right now. And I've been here since 2018.
Right.
And I have flourished so greatly here. This is the Hunters Point Shipyard Artist community. Right. And it is managed by the Turgeon family.
Mm-hmm.
And Jacques Turgeon is the founder of this community. And this originally was a Navy base. And it's a very famous one, as it was established in the 40s, and they made the ships and all the atomic stuff that goes with that. And so once they stopped being here and moved on, Jacques Turgeon saw an opportunity, because it was vacant for a while.
Mm-hmm.
He saw an opportunity to start transforming these military naval offices into studios. And that's where I am right now. I'm on the second floor, and I got this great space. It's a corner space, lots of light, exceptional views all around. And by being here, I'm able to really focus on creating my artwork.
That's nice. That's really cool. Just like we went just within the first 13 minutes, you already went over some of the things that really brought you as an artist to your prominence, and what it is that really allowed you to, I guess, ways to communicate your art and also tell people or just let it be known, like, I belong here. And it's interesting because you and me, we're artists, and we cover different fields. So I'm a voice actor. I work in voiceover arts, and then you work for as a video artist. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you here is because a lot of people who get into the industry of voiceover, mainly people around like more millennials, things they get into like, oh, I want to get into animation and stuff, but they don't realize that the arts in general are they're connected. Okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. They're connected, and there are so many ways and so many things to glean within this community, or this world, actually, not even a community, this world
Yeah.
that can add up for another person's art, whether they be a voice actor or a video artist or a painter or anything like that. And it's always good to explore that versus I'm going to center focus right here on character work and hope I get into that one thing, when there's an entire world of things that can help develop an artist to become the best that they can become.
You're absolutely right. It's very expansive, and it's almost limitless
Yeah.
when you become a creative. Some people don't like that word artist. I throw around other words just in case it turns people off, but I consider myself an artist.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, for me to go from a dancer, because I couldn't afford anything else, and eventually I went to photography. When I went to Chicago, before I actually got the job at Video Data Bank, I was also doing other things like performance art, writing. That's also a really crucial part of being a video artist, filmmaker, or an artist in general. If you're trying to establish a certain perspective about your work, you have to write and develop yourself as well. What else did I learn? I learned how to not be shy through my artwork as well. It's really important to discover art, I think, for all individuals. There's some people that say that they're not an artist, but I beg to differ. I think everybody is.
Yeah.
And everybody has the capability of becoming an artist. It's just finding what that art form is, and then developing it and bringing it to fruition. And it's going to be not only a practice, but there's going to be a lot of missteps along the way. You're going to fall on your face throughout the process, but that's the learning process. Everything is not going to always be perfect. Everything is not going to fit, because what you have in your mind, and then you try to create it, sometimes something misses. You miss the target, and that's okay, because you learn from that mistake, or you learn from those failings. The key is to keep going.
Yep.
And I had to learn to stop, because I'm a Virgo, and I also have a history of trauma, childhood trauma. So when you have trauma, and then you're raised in this mindset of, I got to have everything perfect, so I can make friends, so my mama won't beat me, so blah 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 blah. You have to learn how to trust yourself for the first time through your art.
Yep.
And I had trust issues because of the trauma. But once I got to California, I learned about all kinds of therapeutic ways to find myself. I didn't know about I didn't know about boundaries when I got out here. I thought boundaries was just in sports. Once I got out here, I was just bombarded with all the different ways you can take care of yourself. And I found through one therapist, I couldn't talk through my stuff. For me, it was somatics. Somatic therapy allows you to talk, but it also recognizes that there is a physicality and a psychological aspect of, for me, trauma that requires intense movement, vocalization, where you have to scream, you have to hit things. I have a sledgehammer at home, a 8-pound sledgehammer. And when things are not going right for me, I go get her. I'm gonna call her Big Betty for now.
All right.
But I get Big Betty and I go at it. I pulverize all these stones, and it really helps me vent whatever's going on, gives me perspective. And also I had to, it's not just one type of therapy that works. You have to do several things. You got to eat well. You got to exercise. You got to do meditation. You got to be with nature. There's all these things that I had to learn once I became here, how to be connected with myself, to be better connected into my art, in order to create stories and video work that I hope will connect with others.
Right.
My goal is to create work, not for the sake of selling it. My goal is to use my artwork to heal. I consider myself a creative that uses video to heal and uses art to heal. So what I do primarily is, and it's starting to shift. At first, it was just about me finding about myself and me doing things in front of the camera, a lot of diaristic work, which I guess you call selfies today. But I don't think that doesn't work, because selfies is just a visual statement of where I am presently, what I'm doing right now. But with diaristic work, where you're putting your heart and soul and your pain into that video, and you're hoping that it touches someone else to know that they're not in that struggle alone.
Yes.
And so first I found my voice, and I started building my self-confidence and my self-love and my self-trust. And then once I got to that point, I started finding out what's out there in the world, because I really believe you got to clean your house first before you go out to someone else.
Yep.
And tell them how to clean theirs. So I had to work on myself first. And then I started thinking, how can I use this work to touch and transform lives positively? And who needs to hear it most? And that's where it gets challenging for me, because as a woman, I know that we struggle with a lot of adversity around the world. But now I'm saying to myself, well, what if men also need to be informed and touched in a way that helps them also transform their lives in a positive way? Because I think women are kind of missing the mark by pointing their fingers at men. I think we need to point our fingers at ourselves first and work on that. And then hopefully, once that healing takes place, we can also embrace our male counterparts. That's why it was such a struggle to deal with feminism. I don't call myself a feminist. If I call myself anything, it would be a womanist, which is taken from my girl, Alice Walker. She came up with that term. And I embrace that term because our struggle in our culture is a struggle for all of us. That includes our men.
Right.
Historically, what was done to enslaved Africans and the process in which to break us or try to has had long-term effects.
Right.
And you are still seeing the effects of that process. Why we are still traumatized and tormented and killed on a regular basis. How our men are imprisoned, and the society wants to make them feel less than and will never be manly enough. And as a womanist, our job is to protect our men, to protect our boys as best we can, as we also move forward. We have our challenges because women were used during slavery to emasculate our men. And we were also, as women, traumatized as we watched them get hung, set on fire, quartered, anchored to 4 horses and pulled apart in front of the whole Black community, enslaved community. And that process was in place to instill fear in the woman so she would treat her sons especially very protectively. And we're still like that on some level. Um, so with that said, I'm trying to move forward, address issues that affect us as women, address issues that affect our Black men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're acquainted with Jason Wilson. Have you ever heard of him?
I haven't, but I'm interested to hear.
He is an amazing African American man
Mm-hmm.
who lives in Detroit. He's a martial artist, and he has created an academy. It's called the Cave of Adullam,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a teaching and training academy. And what he does is he takes in young boys, and he totally gives them a space in which they can feel and voice their emotional selves for the first time.
Right.
I have two of his books. The first one is Cry Like a Man,
Mm-hmm.
because he's encouraging men to feel safe enough to cry.
Right.
Because they are socialized not to. And that's what's killing a lot of men. That's why they don't live to be so long. Live long is because of the repression and the holding of emotions in their bodies.
Right.
And that's a stressful way to live, and it shortens their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really encouraging the boys and the fathers and any men actually, because he's on YouTube now.
Mm-hmm.
Just type in Jason Wilson and he'll pop up.
Right.
And I'm wanting to figure out how to incorporate what he's saying in my work to help transform the lives of not only African American people, but people in general.
People in general. So hearing all of this, that you mentioned that your life experience, your history even, and I think that's really important because so I'm Samoan, so which means a Pacific Islander, and one of the things my parents wanted me to learn, especially my mother, and even to this day, she's like, I want you to know about your culture, both the good and the bad that happened, okay, and some of the things that happened, so that you, myself, I know where I come from. Okay, I know where I come from. I know what it is that I represent, and that starts reflecting in my life. And I learn about it every day when I see her. It's like, hey, everything from the way my people express themselves, and all of this really helps to bring into my art as a voiceover. And that just not just for me, like you said, everything we were just talking about, from history of Black American lives, men, women, things. In how you want to incorporate that into your art as well. It's extremely important, and the best part about it is it helps us as artists communicate even more. So when people observe and watch this, they feel more, and it goes from just being like, oh, this is entertainment. It goes from entertainment to being something really meaningful.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And
Absolutely.
I really like that that's being covered right here now, because the other thing that I also like to, it's something I learned too, because I started in the arts when I was about 19, and I'm now in my late 20s, and I went from how the majority of my generation goes, like, oh, hey, we see the results. Okay, the results we see are all the blood, sweat, and tears that were put in by people working to make, say, a video games, animation, anime, all of that. We see the result and we enjoy that result, but we don't see all the hard work that goes into it, the investment, really.
Absolutely.
That goes.
It goes way back. It goes further than just what the young people are encountering now. And that's why I applaud your mom. I know it might be challenging, but I understand her concern, because she doesn't want anything lost. So much has been taken from African Americans. That's why I won't say American until I see the indigenous people taken care of properly. I won't do reparation because to me that's hush money. I'm going to do whatever I can with my artwork to honor the sacrifices of all the people, the millions that was lost in the shipping of Africans over here. Meaning that's why I have seashells everywhere in my studio to remind me of the loss of those people who did not realize that would be the end of their bloodline in some cases.
Right.
Who was on this journey that they didn't ask for. And then to those who survived, and believe me, they were not in good shape when they got to these shores of this country. Those who survived, who had to adapt and adapt quickly to such horrendous environments and almost to the verge of constant torture. There is a trauma that is in our genetics to this day. It's like a genetic muscle memory, in which we still kind of are constricted in who we are, but this is not who we came looking like originally. This is the combination of all kinds of mixtures. We don't have our language. So many languages lost. So many practices and rituals and celebrations lost in the process of coming here. So the pull for me is listening to those voices,
right?
The ancestors, and honoring them. That's why they're all around here. I can't show you my drawings and stuff, but it's all about staying in contact with those ancestors,
right?
Honoring them, letting them know that the sacrifices were appreciated. And I also have to take in consideration that it wasn't just Black Africans that lost their lives. The people that put their lives on the line to try to help, those that taught reading, that was illegal, those that helped with the Underground Railroad,
right?
That people got killed for that. People who were innocent witnesses to lynching that they shouldn't have seen, those people probably got killed. And then I also want to honor the Native Americans who took in runaway slaves and married them and gave them a life. Though that's what motivates me and keeps me going, to honor all indigenous cultures that still are in existence. They, I feel, hold a very crucial part to how this world will stay anchored in their humanity, because they are not driven by money, technology, progress. They're still connected to nature. And that's what we need to start to try to stay in contact with. Stay in contact with nature. Stay in contact with our humanity, and not allow technology to draw us further and further from it. So that's what I'm hoping I can do with my work.
Yeah. That's you bring up really good points too, because the other thing I had noticed as when I was a growing artist, or still am, still am a growing artist, is during COVID, I went from very introverted, because I was like, I'm a usual gamer who's just sitting in his house, so wanting to play video games. But then after sitting in COVID, I was like, I really want to get outside. It's like anything to get outside at the moment. And I thought to myself that it wouldn't just be relieving, but it'd also be a good idea. It would help me as a person, which is what our job is to do for actors, especially, nor for any artist, especially, to communicate the human nature in a different way, shape, or form. And so when I got outside, I spent like the whole day outside. I went from somewhere in late morning to later at evening. I was in San Francisco at the time, and I went to Stern Grove, and I just walked through the whole area. I didn't realize it was so big. I saw people out there walking their dogs. They were happy, and I sat there and just enjoyed the rest of my day. of all things I brought with me to read was my driver's aid manual, because I had to actually learn how to do. I had to learn how to drive at the time, and I know how to. But I also was able to take in the sights, look around, see people communicate with each other, and just like whatever COVID was didn't happen. People were all enjoying themselves. And then I brought a book with me as well. Ended up getting to the creek and just sat there. And what this all did for me as an artist, and what it can do for other people to really get out there in nature, is inform the mind and the body and even the soul about ways to really communicate what's going on, honestly, versus I do funny voices or I paint stick figures type deal or anything like that. It really starts informing a person of how to breathe life into what it is they make.
Right. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And it was a process for me for a little bit, but it's really interesting how I create my work. I mean, I have to be near water. Right. I have to be near nature, and then sometimes it doesn't come to me in a flash, but it could be a word. It could be maybe something in the news. It can be sometimes reactionary, or sometimes if I'm in just a state of loss, if I'm sitting and just crying and don't know why I'm crying, if I open myself up, that's I think the gift of being a true, authentic artist is when you're an artist and you're dealing with you're making yourself known in the public, you have really opened yourself up to being vulnerable to all kinds of individuals who, for whatever reason, won't get you or doesn't want to get you.
Right.
And I had to be okay with that. And I had to learn that the process in which I create my work can be very intense sometimes. Intense in such a way that either the flow of creativeness or the creative flow is just nonstop. It just won't. I'm trying to write it down as fast as I can. And at some point I'm like, or there's days when nothing is there. But what I've learned, and I don't believe in creative blocks where you can't do anything. It's just that you have to, when you feel that way, you have to move.
Right.
You have to do something. I don't care if it's tearing up sheets of paper or going out and throwing rocks or screaming into a pillow even. The process is never from A to Z. It's like A to Q, H to R, and you have to be okay with that. I'm currently working on something that isn't even a video. It's a series I'm calling Innocentologies, and it's an honor series. And what I'm doing is I'm finding historical images. Right now it's Black women, particularly enslaved Black women. Eventually it'll evolve to other women of color who are historically, placed in these positions in which they're clearly exploited and manipulated. I found an image of a Black woman who's breastfeeding a white baby, which means that her baby's milk is not available to her child. She had to give her baby something else. And I found out that was a regular practice back in the day. They would give the baby sugar water or something else because the milk was given to the white baby.
Right.
I turned that piece. I took an ironing board, a miniature ironing board, about a little bit longer than my arm, that folds out, and I took her photograph, I enlarged it, I put it on there, and I'm like, what do you want me to say for you? How can I honor you? Because my thing is I'm going to reappropriate what was appropriated.
Right.
Because the person that exploited her, that took advantage of her and made her do something, and you can see the image. You're talking about back in the day when you couldn't even see a woman's ankle, right? This image is both of her breasts are out while she's feeding the baby.
Right.
Nobody who breastfeeds a child never pulls out both. That was suggested by the photographer. But I also looked closer to that photograph, and that baby is literally almost hanging on for dear life. She's not, it's in her lap, but she's not holding it like she loves that child. You know, that she's nurturing that child. Her hand is turned downward under the baby's head, and the seating is like her knees are apart, and the other hand is resting on her thigh, and the little baby is like kind of dangling. But there was such a sense of, it wasn't sadness, it was almost like defiance in her eye.
Right.
And that's what I saw, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna honor you. I'm gonna put you on this ironing board because that is a metaphor for labor. And so I started doing all these great things. I put seashells, butterflies, jewels, and all these great things on it, and it turned out to be a really beautiful piece. And so I'm starting to make these altars to honor these women that have, you know, who lost their innocence through all kinds of atrocities.
Right.
And I want to also look at how we, who aren't possibly going through atrocities, but we've gone through trauma. I think most people have gone through some form of trauma in their childhood.
Right.
And that innocence was taken away because of it. And so I want to address the power of innocence and how we can get back to it, or how we can reclaim it. Because I think there was something about being, when I see children and when I see the openness in their innocence, when I see their joy in their innocence, when I see them running free in their innocence, and I see them curious and questioning things we stop doing when we get older, or when the innocence is taken from us. So that's where I am right now with that particular piece. What did I title that? I titled it Beauty, Blood, and Milk.
Right.
That's the title of that piece. But I'm going to be doing more of those. But I still am focusing on video. I did a piece, Sacred Coils. I started that in 2020, just before COVID kicked in. Before we had to be isolated at home. And with Sacred Coils, I wanted to draw a parallel between dreadlocks that Black people wear and rope, because sometimes the dreadlocks look like a type of rope, and then the actual rope is the symbol of what we have to endure. And I had to research how to make a hangman's noose, and I had no idea. There's so many videos on YouTube on how to make a hangman's noose, and there's different kinds. I didn't know about the coiling. Like there's 13 coils, 3 coils, 4 coils, and it took me a while. It took me about 2 hours to learn how to make the noose properly, and then after I learned how to make the noose, I learned how to make a noose within, I would say, 60 seconds.
Right.
And so I have nooses all around, not everywhere, but it's a reminder. Because when you think about maybe my great-great-grandfather, or maybe his great-grandfather as well, to show a noose, a rope, was a sign of terror. You know, it was a threat of possibly losing your life. But it just showed how distant we have become, because you see a rope now, it's not a threat anymore. In fact, it felt like a craft.
Right.
You know, oh, I'm finding this hemp rope and I'm making a noose. I felt no fear. I felt no angst or terror the whole time, but I was in pain, and I was in tears, knowing the history of rope.
Mm-hmm.
So I made that video piece and eventually showed it at an exhibition. But I got so many stories for myself. For me, I'm a person who loves sci-fi and fantasy,
Right.
because it's a great escape and it challenges my creative senses. But the reason why I got into sci-fi was because of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek has influenced so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, especially for my generation, Mr. Spock from Star Trek was my first fantasy lover. So
There we go.
when I tell people that, it's like, ooh, what? But it was watching Star Trek and being connected to all the stories that happened. I was inspired from that. Started reading sci-fi, and then I started coming up over time. Once I started doing video, all these stories, I got a bunch of them still in my head. I couldn't do them at the time back in the 90s because the technology was not available.
Right.
I mean, and I wasn't interested in putting it on film.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I'm just gonna have to wait till one day when video technology develops in such a way that I can just throw those ideas right onto, the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can.
Yeah.
Because there's just a phenomenal access to all kinds of creative apps and things of that nature. So I'm really excited about getting ready to get these stories out of my head and making videos with them.
That's good. Yeah, it's when it comes to like creating media, because that's how I got into like doing podcasts and interviewing other people, because like my interview list right now is pretty big to the point I was like, I gotta stop asking because I'm starting to get way too many dates to the point that I need to balance it out. But
yeah,
to hear all these stories from other people that I've either like just met or am starting to get to know, like we met in the city earlier,
yeah.
and when I saw you taking pictures, I was like, I think she's a photographer. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure. Let me go ask though. And then after that, we started chatting about things from arts, different kind of arts, and it opens up more parts of the world right there.
Absolutely.
Of that. And so, like, first off, thank you for agreeing to show up here and really let people know, like, we all have different processes when it comes to creating art and really bringing it forward versus this is the end result right here. Have fun. It's usually not that simple.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have never been able to sit down and just from beginning to end create a piece. It has never been that way for me. And I think it's unrealistic to say you can do that with any art form.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit down and create it straight. When I made a piece when I was in Chicago, this is how I was at some point I was calling like electronic quilts,
Mm-hmm.
because everything I had captured was all random. I had access, because I was at the School of the Art Institute, I had access to equipment that I would heft home every weekend. And I would just spontaneously, if I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would just get a camera and I would just go maybe downtown or whatever. I felt like I wanted to create something and just capture it. But there was no story. There was just capturing images. And then one day I just sat down and like, I got frustrated with the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas case,
Mm-hmm.
where it was a witch hunt, how they treated her. And I was so angry at how they did her. And a lot of women around the country was pissed off about it. I remember when we called New York, and they're like, "What are you doing in New York?" And they're like, "We're so depressed, we can't do anything." We wore black armbands in our office, but it wasn't enough. I needed to get out of my head, so I created my first piece. It's called Edges,
Mm-hmm.
and it evolved around how is it that women cannot come together,
Mm-hmm.
and in a unified, angry body to make something happen for change.
Right.
And so I started just documenting the imagery of myself in these really like military, boots and a beret, and I'm walking around looking angry, and I'm capturing the footage. And then another time I captured some footage when I was on the lake one night. There's a full moon shimmering in the lake. It's super windy,
Mm-hmm.
and my friend was with me, and he captured me with a scarf in the wind, in the dark, with the moon. And I just put all this footage together without a script and made that piece. And it turned out really nice. It got accepted at several festivals around the world, actually. And
Nice.
it's the reason why I went to Toronto. My work went overseas to Europe. And I I still kind of work like that, but now that I have, my MacBook, I'm writing things down and getting them out of my head in a way so I don't drive myself crazy. But the
Definitely.
process is unending. You're never going to hit a apex and everything levels out. Learning with art is the same with learning in life. It doesn't end.
Yeah. And
It's ongoing till you leave this planet.
yeah, I
Literally.
I totally agree, and it's a good thing that definitely keeps us busy. But that being said, like first off, thank you again for coming on to the
Well,
podcast.
I wanted to thank you too, Richie. I
Yeah.
really appreciated that you came to me and you were so genuine and gentle.